Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Julian, and I'm the administrator of ACE. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for the second webinar of the ACE webinar series entitled Planting the Seed, Empowering the Next Generation of Co-op Rural Development Professionals. We're very glad today to have you here with us for this exciting webinar. As you know, ACE is an international nonprofit organization that has for mission to strengthen cooperatives and the cooperative movement by promoting innovative educational responses to social and economic changes. ACE is very proud to present this webinar series sponsored by the CHS Foundation. Today's webinar is entitled Agritourism and Outdoor Adventure Tourism and is presented by Maura Schwartz. Maura is a nationally and internationally recognized cooperative business consultant who helps rural entrepreneurs analyze the feasibility of starting cooperative businesses. Maura has a master's in international agricultural development, a bachelor in animal sciences, and MBA coursework in marketing and accounting. Maura lives in Washington, D.C., but she is rarely there. So without any further ado, Maura, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Julian. I know we expected more people to join. Hopefully they will a little bit later. But for those who are on, and I know you're on mute right now, I would like this to be a little bit more interactive. So we can use the chat function to post some questions, or if I ask you a question, you can respond and we can all see the answers that you post. So first of all, we're looking at cooperatives and agritourism and outdoor adventure tourism and what opportunities there are for rural communities. And Carolyn's going to advance slides for me, so I'll keep saying next. Next. Thanks. So what we'll cover today is what is agritourism, what is outdoor adventure tourism, what are some background research findings, what do customers really want from their experience. We'll talk about and show examples of both types of tourism. We'll share cooperative examples of both types. We'll look at what your state or province might help you do in rural areas relative to these two opportunities, and how we as cooperative developers can help rural residents create opportunities in these two areas. Next slide. So who am I? Why am I here? I am an outdoor adventurer, particularly by bicycle. I have worked with cooperatives for about 30 years, and I've done everything from development to advocacy to board training. I've done this from Albania in all kinds of rural American towns. And right now I'm working as a cooperative specialist on an international finance core agribusiness leadership program, predominantly in Africa and Latin America. I have worked on rural tourism projects in Romania, where we were looking at travel organizations, so associations versus cooperatives. And I've worked in about 15 countries and have been a traveler on all 7 continents. Next slide. Give you a little idea of some of the work that I did while I was living in rural Oregon. I worked with my community on various economic development projects. And this included building community support for a designated scenic bikeway, initiating the high desert educational agriculture tours, assisting Native American artists create a cooperative to safely craft, store, and sell their products. I was on the board of a local farmers market, and I volunteered on the city's finance, budget, and economic development grant committee. This committee provided funds for local projects, and I helped them establish guidelines for the grant program funding so that it would really promote economic development and not just anybody else's project that they wanted to do. Next slide. I have a passion for outdoor adventure, cooperative businesses, and rural living. Even though I now live in Washington, D.C., I continue to consult with Travel Oregon, which is the statewide tourism entity, and I'm a facilitator for a unique program called Rural Tourism Studio. This concept won a national award for bringing diverse rural community stakeholders together to create tourism opportunities. And this is mostly in agriculture, agritourism, outdoor adventure, and cultural tourism. And this is what we'll get at today is rural agritourism, outdoor adventure tourism, and view it with the lens for how cooperatives fit into this rural landscape. Rural economic development and the potential for co-ops is the thread that we'll weave throughout this webinar. Given that there's so few of us, if you have questions, go ahead and post them on the chat and I can try and address them while we're on that slide. Otherwise, we'll have the Q&A at the end. Next. Rural tourism development is now a top priority on the economic agenda of many countries. This is the actual definition from the World Tourism Organization. Next. Using that definition that rural tourism is an activity which takes place in the countryside, turns out that the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, they came up with this definition. Rural tourism is located in agricultural landscapes and is characterized by enjoyment of a tamed nature or highly modified landscape. It's about land uses and human cultures that the interaction between humans and the land have created. It positions agriculture and farms as the foundation upon which the attraction is built. Any form of tourism that showcases the rural life, art, culture, and heritage in rural locations and benefits the local community economically and socially, as well as enabling interaction between the tourists and the locals, provides for a more enriching tourism experience. And that's what rural tourism is about. So this, as you can hear, it's multifaceted and may entail farm or agricultural tourism, cultural tourism, nature tourism, adventure tourism, and ecotourism. As against conventional tourism, when we focus it on rural, it has certain typical characteristics, such as it's an experience-oriented, the locations are sparsely populated, it's predominantly in the natural environment, it meshes with seasonality and local events, and is based on the preservation of culture, heritage, and traditions. Next. This complicated graphic, and I cited the reference for it, really shows that community is at the heart of all this. And the red line around community is my addition. Rural tourism can be an important source of jobs for local communities. Tourism in general can be an important force for developing disadvantaged rural areas. In particular, rural communities with few other options for development may perceive that tourism represents a panacea for growth. This figure presents one way of viewing the complex nature of rural regions and tourism's role by mapping the links between all these various elements and issues. The map serves its purpose in illustrating the relationship between tourism and rural regions. The community, as we mentioned, is central to this process, and in many ways, it can't be separated from any of the elements on the map. So this image refers to promoting rural tourism cooperatives in Iran. But if you look at this, you can actually say this could be anywhere. This could be my community or your community. In a 2009 issue of the magazine Nature and Science, the authors, Arif and Gill, presented the findings of other authors, one in particular last name Daniela, and this was in 2002, and specifically citing rural cooperatives. And these can be an effect on rural tourism development through three major capacity building levels. Community, meaning the informal groups bounded geographically. Organizationally, referring to a tourism organization. And at the individual level, referring to people. Through empowering rural individuals, the researchers found that this leads to community empowerment. The individual level in this process plays out repeatedly, and increased individual power toward rural tourism development. And to me, when I read this paper, it sounded absolutely like this is what cooperatives do. We help individuals become more empowered, which has a multiplier effect within the community and within a bigger boundary. In considering the application of rural cooperatives in tourism development, the role of rural leaders deserves consideration. A leader or leaders frequently play an important role in these processes. And important goals of leaders with respect to rural cooperatives and tourism development would include encouraging participants, encouraging learning, and developing local skills in rural areas. This to me also sounds like what cooperatives do. And one set of researchers in 1997 found that while tourism can certainly be an important component of a sound economic development plan, this is not always the case. The researchers noted that rural tourism impact varies greatly among rural regions and depends on a host of factors, including workforce characteristics and seasonality issues. Next slide. Indeed, a big lesson learned from the Rural Tourism Studios and the Scenic Bikeway program in Oregon's rural areas that I mentioned at the beginning that I've been involved with is that locals must take ownership for these projects for them to be sustainable. And this is where I think we can encourage cooperative businesses. This image here shows those 3 levels of empowerment I mentioned: individual, rural, and organizational. It shows where rural cooperatives come in, where there's an opportunity for rural tourism development, and self-help groups who can become involved. What I'd like to do now is have us consider some real-world examples and think about what target tourism, who our target audience is, and what they want. So as we go through these examples, I would like you to consider how a cooperative business might work. And also remember that these 2 types of tourism, agritourism and outdoor adventure, are not independent, and we'll see some good examples of combining the 2. Next slide. Agricultural tourism refers to a visit to a working farm or any agricultural, horticultural, or agribusiness operation in order to enjoy, be educated, or become actively involved in the activities on the farm or operation. The visitor wants an authentic farm experience. The posters you see now are for the program that I helped initiate in rural Central Oregon, in the county I lived in, Jefferson County, which is predominantly, and the main driver is agriculture. So we called this High Desert Educational Agriculture Tours, or HD Eats. Where I was living in Madras is on a major roadway that takes people between Portland, Hood River, and Bend. And if you're familiar with Oregon and that triangle, you'll know that each one is a major outdoor mecca. A lot of tourism in all of those areas. 15,000 vehicles a day travel through the region, mainly going to Bend. They're not stopping in Jefferson County. And in fact, most travelers are not very familiar with Jefferson County, which, as I mentioned, as you're driving through, it's what you see as agriculture and great big mountain views. We designed this HD Eats as an agricultural education program, and we're fortunate to receive a lot of local support from community groups, such as Oregon State University Extension, the local chamber of commerce, local farms and agribusinesses, a regional food and farm nonprofit, and the regional tourism entity. Our goal is to have visitors get out of their cars in Jefferson County and learn more about the agriculture and livelihoods they see as they were passing through. The organizational committee was made up of various stakeholders with huge support from the Extension office. We designed theme tours and we charged just enough to cover gas, but keep it very affordable. All the participating farms volunteered their time and most went overboard to showcase what they do. They're so proud of it. We've got great feedback. The tours were fantastic learning experiences. The farmers all requested to be included again for the next year. And we had numerous requests from other farms wanting to be part of a tour. Participants really loved this experience. What was our surprising result? 90% of the participants were from Jefferson County. People really wanted to learn more about what's in their own backyards. We did not get any of the 15,000 people stopping en route to Bend. And what we learned from another tour we did through this called Springs to Sprout was the only way we were going to get people is if we provided round-trip transportation service to and from Bend, which was 45 miles away. What we were most successful in this agri-tour was the number of participants and repeat attendance on this Springs to Sprouts tour. This one was a collaboration with a Bend-based nonprofit focusing on water users and water issues along the Deschutes River throughout the three-county region. The emphasis here was to get to know each other and our seemingly uncompromising views about equitable water use. If any of you are from the West, you'll know water is a highly contentious issue. The success of the tour was that people on opposing sides of this hotly contested water use argument finally learned the importance of the Deschutes River water for all users. In the first year we did the Spring to Sprout tour, we had one bus full, about 45 participants. In year 2, we had 2 buses and we could have filled 3, but we didn't want to overwhelm the farmers with over 100 people. So just an example of what we thought we were doing, developing these agricultural tours, who we thought our target audience would be, and who ended up being our actual target audience. And I see somebody posted a comment that says, my community has an open farm day every year and it's a huge success. Thanks. And there's a website link to that, which is really cool. Next slide. So thinking about this, the open farm day, themed tour ideas bring people out to farms. And you can have a variety of different themes, whether it's open farm, whether it's hunter-gatherer, you pick. The map that you see on the left is from Hood River, which is famous for its orchards. And they designed a route called the Fruit Loop. And this loop can be done in a car or by bicycle. The second photo is Breakfast on the Farm from rural Wisconsin. Get people out to the farm. They're all helping cook their eggs. I don't know if you can see that in the picture. That is a massive fry pan of eggs. The other ideas for tours, which you've probably seen, ale trails, wine routes. I'm not sure if any of you are from Canada, but their Canada examples are really terrific. So let's start with a couple. And Terry also says, we have sugar bushes, maple syrup tours. And NB, you're in New Brunswick? Yes, okay. So let's just go through a couple of the Canadian examples. In British Columbia, in the Okanagan area, they have a whole tour program called Tours of Abundance. And the 5 main themes, again, we're focusing on theme tours now to get people to farms. A rich heritage with stops of historical interest, a fruitful harvest, fruits and orchards, an overflowing bounty, wineries and vineyards, a land of plenty, farms and ranches, delicious enterprises, that showcase tasty agri-food products, and abounding activity. It's a combination of outdoor adventure and agritourism, looking at skiing, golfing, cycling, and river tours. Ontario boasts a number of agricultural travel routes that feature themes as well. Cheese, apple, and wine routes. There are special events and festivals. In fact, the Niagara area has 23 stops on a wine route that offer quality wines produced by award-winning wineries. In Ontario, there's been a recent marriage between the arts, with the Stratford Festival, and agritourism. The result is the development of the name of this is Get Out of Town Agritours, and it operates in conjunction with several summer festival events. In Newfoundland and Labrador, agritourism potential is centered around numerous farmers markets, farm and greenhouse operations with craft shops, strawberry U-picks, horse and carriage rides, farm and winery tours, ag fairs, farm or field days. And Manitoba has regional agritourism networks and encourages cooperative marketing. In Nova Scotia, there are some agricultural-based festivals. One in particular, the annual 4-day Apple Blossom Festival, draws an estimated 125,000 visitors to the Annapolis Valley area each spring. And on a smaller scale, in Alberta, the farm-based Prairie Gardens and Greenhouses features a haunted house as part of an overall Halloween theme. This attracts busloads of school children from Edmonton. The popularity of the Halloween theme is personified by a pumpkin festival. And held each fall, these festivals attract about 5,000 people on a single weekend. So obviously, there's some really good opportunity here. And you can start thinking about how could this be done with cooperative businesses. Next slide. You can also bring a themed festival into your town. These photos are from a recent trip I made in southern France to Mirepoix, and it is an annual apple festival. And I could not believe, you can see there's a car made of apples, everything that you can possibly make to eat out of apples or drink. There's an elephant made out of apples. I've never quite seen an apple cake like the one in the bottom right. I didn't get to taste it. It looked really amazing. This is a weekend festival, and it was packed. We rode our bikes to get to this festival and then parked them and walked around, and it was amazing how many people were in this small town square. Next slide. In the US state of Virginia, this is a comprehensive list of what it has for agritourism activities. I'm going to scroll through these. And what I'd like you to do in the chat function is to note which one of these agritourism activities surprised you. Like you hadn't heard of this before. And also think about which ones could be a cooperative enterprise. And go ahead and chat on these as we scroll through. I'm not going to read them all, give you time to look at them. Fee fishing pond, yeah. I was impressed with farm scavenger hunt. Okay, I'm going to go to the next one. Yeah, corn mazes are really popular and they're packed. Okay, one more example. I would love to go see what pumpkin chucking is. I don't know whether they use cannons or, it's just who can heave a pumpkin the farthest distance based on the weight of the pumpkin. And how about stargazing and moonlight activities? You know, we tend to think of agriculture as being a daytime activity or agritourism. I thought this made a great opportunity to keep people around for longer keep them all night to the next day. And rodeo snow sledding. I mean, some of these are great ideas. It'd be a hoot to watch. I worked with a group of women who organized a quilting cooperative in Southern Oregon, right on the California line, and they wanted to have barns in the area, put a quilt block, paint a quilt block on there, and then have quilters do each one of the farms and have a quilt trail where you went to see the barn and the block that was painted on the barn, but then have an opportunity to meet local quilters and purchase quilts or custom order quilts. That was something. Yeah, and seeing stars. See Terry's comment. Okay, next slide. So here's some other examples that have been pretty successful. While I'm reading this, Caroline, if you look, you can go to the next slide. And you see where it says V6 Ranch in white? Could you click on that? It should be a hyperlink that'll take you, it'll switch you from the PowerPoint to your web browser. Did it work? There we go. And then we'll come back in a second. Give everybody looking a chance to see this website for the V6 Ranch. This ranch promotes itself to people seeking experiences that go beyond a comfy bed and a good meal. The woman, Barb Varian, who owns it, said the booking inquiries for her family's cattle drives have risen about 50% in the past 2 years. And her take on this is that as the world becomes busier, it seems people are longing for an adventure. I don't know if some of you are familiar with Sunset Magazine. It's a popular West Coast magazine. It listed top 8 agritourism experiences in the West. V6 is just one. Some of the others that it lists are Hidden Villa in Los Altos. It's a Spanish-style estate, and it has classes on everything from milking cows to making sausage and cheese. Los Poblanos Historic Inn near Albuquerque. It's on a 25-acre organic farm, and it runs cooking classes and has field to fork dinners. There are a couple of cheeseries around the Pacific Northwest where you can learn how to make goat cheese, learn how to take care of goats, there's another farm where you can learn hen butchering. You can learn to be a winemaker at Falena Winery in Walla Walla, Washington. And there's even a beekeeper farm in Los Angeles where every second Saturday of the month you can attend beginner-friendly workshops. Okay, now if we can go back to the PowerPoint. And if you can be on slide 17. Yeah, next slide. So a couple things to consider. Before you invite people to your farm, you need to understand what are land use rules, insurance issues, food and beverage licensing requirements, any registration for taxes and required signage. And we're going to talk about these, where to find these pieces of information a little bit later in the presentation. Next slide. Okay, let's move now into outdoor adventure tourism. And one thing that's really important as you're considering outdoor adventure tourism is everybody has their own definition and level of adventure tolerance. And that's the fun of it. We need to think really broadly about this because someone who loves to mountain bike may not want to be in a kayak. Everybody has different level of what they like to do, especially if you've got small children in tow. So this whole concept of adventure tourism is something that's growing continually. So let's look at some examples. Next slide. This is in Ten Sleep, Wyoming. And again, Carolyn, if you can click on the little hyperlink there, Ten Sleep Brewing, so people get to see the website. So one thing while you're looking at this, for those of you on the call, Wyoming was the first state in the US to grant women the right to vote. And I'd like you to hold on to that fact as we talk about this example. So for someone outside of Wyoming, it's hard to grasp the novelty of microbrewing and artisanal distilling in Wyoming. And it's not about following a trend. This company says it's about self-reliance and breaking the cycle of dependency. It's also about inclusiveness. It's about finding new ways to employ people and build careers. Wyoming has one of the highest gender wage gaps in the US, where women earn 77 cents for every dollar earned by men. Family brewing and distilling enterprises are helping to level that inequality, again, in the state that was the first to grant women the right to vote. So despite the popularity and the beautiful setting, the little town of Ten Sleep struggles to maintain its population. It's currently at 250 and dropping. Any new business must, by necessity, attract the widest array of customers. This brewery, which opened in 2013, has successfully built a following among outdoor recreation enthusiasts, particularly climbers, which is not a category of people you would typically find in small town Wyoming bars. Initially, and now, it has become one of the biggest events of the summer for this brewery, attracts over 500 people annually. Again, remember, this is a town that's trying to hold on to 250 people, so it's doubling the size of the town. It's the Bighorn Mountain Climbers Coalition, and it's a fundraiser for their nonprofit that supports climbing improvements and education. And this brewery actually hosts it. And in the course of developing their business, this brewery ended up becoming a de facto community center. It has a huge lawn out with a beer garden. It attracts locals and tourists. And the more events they throw and have large parties with outdoor music and food vendors, keg tosses, the more people they get to come in. Just another example of what one small business could do in a rural community, attracting outdoor adventurers, as well as combining it with this ag product. Okay, if we could, next slide. The New York State Seaway Trail is America's longest national byway, and it got federal designation in 1996. It's 454-mile scenic road system that parallels the St. Lawrence River, Lake Ontario, Niagara River, and Lake Erie. There are 50 additional miles of trail along Pennsylvania's shoreline. And the fun part about this trail is it's multimodal, meaning you can do this any way you want for outdoor adventure. You can drive it, bicycle it, motorcycle, you can paddle it, you can fish on it, and you can cross-country ski it. What it has done is tied in all these other recreational opportunities along the way, such as museums, historic buildings, local theater, art festivals, art galleries, a mural tour, and county fair entertainment. So again, I'm trying to get you to think a little broader about what does a trail really mean and how can we add this cooperative business level into it. Here are a couple other ideas. Next slide. There could be unique farm stands, such as lavender, wool, or alpaca, general stores that carry local foods, products, beers, wines, a local-oriented lodging, something along a river or along the trails, provide access to fishing, quilt stores and a quilt trail, And any time you can have cultural highlights for before, during, or after the tourist's adventure helps keep them around longer. Next slide. I mean, those of us who live in rural areas, you hear a lot of people complaining about dirt roads. We have to take advantage of all these. The biggest trend right now in bicycling is biking gravel, often called gravel grinders. If you're in a rural community, this is just tremendous opportunity. Get people off on rural roads to passing farms. Need to be somewhat self-sufficient. However, you can also have tour opportunities. Vermont has several, even gravel grinder races. The one in Vermont that really connects a lot of opportunities here is called the Gravel Growler. And it connects small local craft breweries and distilleries by gravel roads and trails. So riders can get the services they need when they come through the rural community along the way. While they're getting their activity, they're having an adventure, and they finish it up with beer. Now I have a couple of examples. We'll move into real world examples with cooperatives. The first is Mad River Glen Ski Area in Waitsfield, Vermont. And this is interesting because in an age when the ski industry is becoming increasingly consolidated and homogenized, this is the United States' only skier-owned major mountain. It's absolutely bucking the trend by remaining independent and preserving a brand of skiing that exists nowhere else. It is a cooperative. It had to overcome many big challenges in the first 2 decades, but it's been able to pay off its mortgage, proven its ability to manage the ski area, and has invested $5 million in capital projects. What's interesting in the small rural town of Waitsfield is that a lot of times, I was talking to someone from Vermont this morning, and he said the ski areas attract all the business and it doesn't spread out. It goes out of the local community. In this case, a lot of the revenue comes back into the community through this cooperative ski mountain. Next slide. One more. There we go. So who among you might have thought of cooperative golf? Right? Not something you'd think about as something with co-ops. But interestingly, if you go behind the scenes, you can understand how a cooperative or association can help. The Audubon Society has a cooperative golf course program. It's an unusual partnership. It's run as an association of members. The membership is open to golf courses in the US and internationally, and it includes private clubs, public and municipal courses, PGA sites, 9-hole facilities, resort golf courses, and residential golf settings. What this program does is get you to take stock of environmental resources and potential liabilities, and then develop an environmental plan that fits the unique setting, goals, staffing issues, budget, and time for your particular golf course. Through this cooperative program, Audubon International provides a site assessment, environmental planning, and help guides you with not only those 2 subjects, but wildlife and habitat management, chemical use reduction and safety, water conservation, water quality management, outreach, and education. And when you get a copy of this presentation, if you click on these links that I have made hyperlinks, it'll take you right to those websites so you can actually get more information about it directly. Next slide. This one I loved, Golf Ball Divers Cooperative. This was organized in 2016, and it's the US's first cooperative of golf ball divers. The members of this cooperative retrieve golf balls from the water traps, as they always have, but instead of selling the retrieved balls to big resellers, they process and package the retrieved balls under their own brand name. The golf balls are sold online through a branded e-commerce site, and the profit goes to its members. They have a full-time dedicated staff running it. In their own words, why did they organize this? Fairness. Fairness for the customers, because by selling direct, we can make the game they love more affordable. Fairness for the member owners, because as they collect and process and sell the balls they dive for, they get a fairer payment for the hard, dirty, and dangerous work they do, and more security for their families. I would encourage you to go to this website and read some of the stories about why they organize this in terms of dangerous work. The other thing this group does, which is again another aspect of cooperative business that will resonate with all of us, is they offered a benefit to another group, those with barriers to employment. And thanks to a unique partnership with Lapeer Teamworks Industries, located in Lapeer, Michigan, this Golf Ball Divers Association has built a state-of-the-art golf ball processing facility, employing many who wouldn't otherwise have a job. Next slide, one more golf example where a cooperative has come into play. Again, behind the scenes, in Scotland, which is famous for golf courses, requires first aid for all employees at Scottish golf courses. A couple of the training coordinators decided to organize first aid training cooperative. They realized that it was so hard to be self-employed as trainers, first aid trainers, and market themselves to the various golf courses. And they had to keep up in an industry that had ever increasing regulation and changing best practices. So they decided if they organized the cooperative, they could offer a centralized administration to get rid of the administrative burden for individual trainers. And they could provide an opportunity for trainers to share best practices and get training themselves and keep up to date. Again, another behind the scenes, people playing golf would never know that there's a cooperative here, but it works. Next slide. Just quickly, in New South Wales, Australia, there are places with cooperative outdoor adventure tourism. There are bowling clubs, ski clubs, arts and crafts cooperatives, golf co-ops, sailing, tennis, recreation, fitness, and air tours. There's a wine consumers cooperative, and there's 3 taxi cooperatives to get locals and tourists to all these different places. Next slide. When I mentioned before, you need to understand regulations, insurance, signage. Where do you go for help? And the Canada example, I'm not sure you can click through on that, Carolyn, you could try. But Alberta offers a fact sheet to introduce agritourism festivals and special events as opportunities for farms and ranches. And the fact sheet provides all the information they'll need to know. In Oregon, for example, the statewide travel entity Travel Oregon is just a wealth of knowledge. It helped put together the Oregon Agribusiness Handbook. And we've seen some other examples from Virginia, Montana, California, Vermont, New York, Washington. A lot of these states, their ag extension offices have comprehensive programs, Kentucky as well. And I just saw this from California, actually, that its small farm and agritourism program got a small amount of money to train people in small communities in agribusiness and how to consider what it takes to start an agritourism enterprise. And the interesting part of this program, which to me resonated with ACE in terms of education, is that they're targeting small communities and training people in those communities who will then offer training to others in their communities. So it's a training of trainers in agritourism so that there's a local person in your community who will be the key point person And for those of us who've lived in rural communities, you know it's always a lot easier to get traction and get projects moving when it's initiated by locals and not from outsiders. Just a couple other examples. In Italy, it offers agritourism stays and they have really great signage program. In Greece, in rural communities, there are women's agritourism cooperatives. Spain has fantastic wayfinding signs for outdoor adventurers and to be able to take advantage of agritourism as well. Israel, you can do a staycation on a kibbutz. And New Zealand has bike routes. It's an outdoor adventure mecca. It has more sheep than people, and it is really promoting this opportunity to get an authentic experience. So this last slide are some questions for us to consider, and then we'll open it up. You can unmute yourselves. So what can existing rural cooperatives do to promote tourism in the region? What will it take to have tourism operators work together as cooperatives? And consider some of the examples like golf ball divers. Farm families are already really busy. So how can a cooperative help them diversify their on-farm income without adding more to their workload? This is in terms of a tourism opportunity. We need to think, is rural tourism and a cooperative, is it a panacea? Can it really help build and correct infrastructure issues, transportation systems? And is your rural community tourist ready? Are entrepreneurs ready to open cafes, lodging options? Are there other support businesses that you need to have? And most importantly, if it works, how will an increase of visitors to your rural area affect locals' quality of life? So with that, let's unmute yourselves, and if you have questions or thoughts, I know we've seen some really good comments, and I'll be quiet.
So thank you, Maura, for the great presentation today. It was great to have you on this webinar. So there is, if there is questions, feel free to use the chat box in the corner of your screen. We'll still have 5 minutes to take questions at this point. This webinar was recorded, so if you want to see it again, it'll be on ACE's website in a couple weeks. It takes a couple weeks for us to process all the information and to transfer to the website. Otherwise, if you have questions, feel free to ask them now. If not, we can put in touch with Maura after this webinar is done as well.
My email, if we advance one more slide, my email's on there.
There it is. All right, so thank you again, Maura, for the presentation. And we look forward to seeing you again, to the participants, to the next webinar, which is on Thursday. Thank you.
Yeah, we have one question before we hang up, if we can. Terry just posted, do we have an example of a municipality that is a great example and one that's supportive? Yeah, I do. There's a very small town. It's now got 2,000 people. It's in Central Oregon, called Sisters. And Sisters is world famous for an outdoor quilt festival. And for about 2 weeks, over the course of the first week is all quilting, training, education, instruction. And the second part of that is this amazing outdoor quilt festival. You've never seen anything like it. It brings in thousands of people to this tiny town. Everybody rents out farm stays, and people are looking for lots of other opportunities. The reason I bring this up as an example is because it's also at the very edge of a wilderness area at the mountains, in the Cascade Mountains on the east side. And people come, it's a mountain bike mecca, it's a backcountry ski mecca. It's a tiny little town, and one half of it loves all these opportunities, and the other half of it complains because there's so much traffic and it's hard to go into a restaurant during high tourist season. And there's a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit through that town because it's so pedestrian friendly and bike friendly, hikers, etc. So we've got all kinds of tourism examples. Tourism is definitely the number one economic engine in that community. Are there cooperatives there? No. Could there be? Absolutely. There, in my opinion, like having a tour guide cooperative or transportation co-op, even there's a couple breweries. I think there's just a huge opportunity for people to do things together a little bit more. Of course, I just moved from Oregon, so a lot of my examples are from there. Another one that worked really well in Hood River is instead of using currency, they came up with a barter currency system called gorge dollars. It's in the Hood River, or the Columbia River Gorge, which is a magnificent scenic area. And it's for locals. So they've essentially formed a cooperative where they barter their goods and services using gorge dollars instead of actual dollars. And it promotes keeping business local. And that one is actually co-op.
Was there any other questions on the among the participants? So seeing nothing, thank you again, Maura, for the presentation. People have your email address on the screen, or you can contact ACE if you want more information. Also, feel free to visit our website, ace.coop, and also the website ed.coop, which is a website that has different learning paths for people learning about co-ops. I see there is a last question for you, Maura.
What is the most up-and-coming agritourism opportunity? That's a really good question because I think it depends on that target market. I am seeing research. Okay, let me give you a little background on why I think this is, because it's in my sphere. I brew beer as a home brewer, and so I follow this industry pretty closely in the craft brew industry. There's now 7,000 craft brewers in the United States, and they estimate there's over 100 that may go online every month. A lot of opportunity in agritourism with locally sourced products, and people really like to see where things are grown and then get to go taste the beers or distilled products that are made with it. And that, like 100% local beer made with everything local, or vodka, is really, it's not an up and coming. I think it's already happening. It's just really exploding now. So that's one thing I'm seeing. And then I think people really are starting to want to know more about their food and where it comes from. And one of those first pictures you saw, we brought people to an organic dairy. And the whole idea of learning about what it takes to produce organic milk that will go into all the organic products was enthralling to people. So this opportunity to see things they normally wouldn't be able to see and gain a better understanding. Yeah, you bet.
All right, this is the end of our time. So thank you again, Maura, for your time today. It was a great webinar that we really liked. So if you have any questions, once again, feel free to send Maura an email. The address is on the screen. You can contact ACE for more information as well. And as mentioned earlier, the webinar will be available on our website, ace.coop, within a couple of weeks. So stay tuned and you'll find it there. Thank you again for your participation today, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.